are now watching the Amazin Mets pregame show with your hosts, Rob and CP.
Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets! Let's go Mets!
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazin Mets pregame show right here on both of our channels. Make sure you hit on that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you do so. And we get to talk about a rubber game, Mets' nice victory yesterday, and a guy who is back, as you see at the bottom of my screen. Edwin Diaz is back, and we will talk about him. And then the unfortunate news that Danny Young does get sent down during that swap to add Diaz back to the roster. But let's say what up to CP. CP, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, talking about a 10-4 win, talking about some offensive production finally at Citi Field. I'm kind of hype, Rob. I'm not going to lie to you. We got a rubber match right here, series finale. The Mets need this win. The Mets need a series win here, and they're right on schedule to go 4-6 in this homestand, depending on what they do in the Padres series, just like I had drew it up right before this homestand started. So I'm really hyped. I'm not going to lie to you. I love the offensive production that we saw yesterday. Daniel Nunez, another name. I know we're talking about Danny Young. Unfortunate him being sent down, but 5 strikeouts over 2 and 1/3 innings pitched. Electricity. But I appreciate you all. Thank you for everyone being in the chat. I appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up on the stream. Means a lot. Let's go Mets. That's all I got to say. This should be a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? What about that lineup change? I'm so glad they did it. Again, this is the second time in a matter of a month there was problems offensively with certain guys, and they made changes. And I love the fact, no matter who makes the change, no matter if David Stearns and his analytical team, or if it's Mendoza just on his gut feeling, they changed to see what works again. And they did it. And yes, Nimmo didn't play yesterday or didn't start yesterday. Beta was number 2 hitter, but I wanted Nimmo back in or put in that 2 spot. And JD Martinez in the 3. I would rather swap it with Alonso, but I'm not going to go crazy with that. I think it's fine either way. But hopefully this gets Alonso going because, we could talk about yesterday's win, Alonso did look a tiny bit better at the plate, but he looks lost into space. Like the other night, Lindor had his arm around Alonso, and he looked like a lost puppy. Like, look, I'm glad that they changed the lineup, and I'm hoping this revitalizes this entire lineup and gets Pete Alonso going, because we can be all honest about this. We need Pete Alonso to get going as well for this team to take a next level. Even with Lindor doing what he's doing and Vientos doing what he's doing, you need that type of production that Pete Alonso provides if you're going to go anywhere. And unfortunately, right now he's not. But they really did it without him yesterday. I mean, it was impressive how they, the Marlins kept on coming back. And I know a lot of us were getting worried because you know how that bullpen always finds its way to make it interesting. And you talked about Nunez, who is absolutely amazing yesterday. And I thought he was going to get sent down, which would have had Met fans go nuts. But Danny Young was the odd man out. A lot of people wanted Ottavino to be DFA'd. But Chris, I want to get your thoughts on yesterday's game because, there was a lot of good, but there is some little things that are still worrisome with this lineup. And you're hoping that this lineup change kind of changes fortune for like Nimmo and maybe Alonso, and maybe that with Vientos going and Lindor going, you can get that 1 through 5, 1 through 6 that can really get going, because even Marte is even hitting the ball crazy right now. So what are your thoughts on this lineup right now, good or bad? And what do you think it's going to provide in this game with this lineup change?
Yeah, I always got to keep it objective. I can't sit here in front that I was the biggest proponent of Starling Marte batting 5th, behind Pete Alonso going into the season as protection, but he's done an absolutely tremendous job. We could talk about his right field play all we want. Obviously, he's one of the worst right fielders defensively in the game. We saw that in the London Baseball Classic, but this guy is tearing the cover off the baseball. He's going all fields, and he's just doing it all. He's driving in runs, he's getting on base, and he's being a table setter to even a Mark Vientos right now, who's also ripping the cover off the ball. I mean, Mark Vientos' OPS is over 900, absolutely phenomenal. He's batting 321 on the season. This lineup right now looks good. Obviously, there was a little bit of a lineup switch up. You know that I was also a proponent of Nimmo batting third, looked a little lost at that 3-hole spot. I see Blunt Thoughts Hector in the chat as well. We all know that Hector and I were leading the charge there in terms of that lineup shakeup, and we actually got it to get Francisco Lindor going. And I really was hopeful that Brandon Nimmo was going to kind of slot into that third hole and be that table setter, that run producer that we all thought he could be. But it just hasn't worked out. He got the day off, and you know what? The offense went out there in Brandon Nimmo's absence, and they put up a 10 spot in front of the home crowd, which is incidentally what always plagues this team is hitting in front of the home crowd, and they did it. Lindor with the home run, obviously, just a whole bunch of offensive barrage there to talk about. And I don't even think that I believe it was Peterson yesterday on the mound, right? If I'm not mistaken, Peterson didn't have his best stuff, right? He gave up 4 earned runs. He went 5 innings. He got the job done, and he kept the game close, especially when the Mets got him a lead. But you know what? The bullpen did its job, and they get the reinforcement back today in Mr. Edwin Diaz. And hopefully this offense tonight is going to set him up in a position to get his first save since coming back off the IL. I want to see that. I hope that it's a confidence boost. But you know what? This lineup right here, I'm looking at it top to bottom. Yeah, I get it. They got Roddery Munoz, who's got a 5.95 ERA. I'm not even sure he's a right-handed pitcher like it says on the screen here. I would still like to see Jose Iglesias in the lineup. Obviously, one sort of snippet that you didn't mention and discuss here in the early goings, which kind of shocked the Mets Twitter world here, is that Brett Baty is making his debut at second base in AAA. And we can kind of foresee all the things that are happening and brewing here at the second base spot for this Mets team. But nonetheless, I really like this lineup. And I think that this is a prime lineup to put up some more runs. Listen, the Mets are 29-37. I'm not going to sit here and celebrate a 10 spot in one game. I need to see them go out there and produce some consistency. If you've heard one word while watching our podcast, whether it's this pregame, whether it's the postgame, whether it's the roundtable, or anything else in between that we do on our channels talking about the Mets, it's consistency.
Yep.
That's what we are preaching here. So we need to just sit here and watch what they do offensively in today's game. But I like the lineup construction. The Mets, Carlos Mendoza, David Stearns, they have not been hesitant to make personnel changes. At this point, I had Nick from the He Did This To Me podcast on my channel on the post game the other day. He was a very big proponent for changing the lineup again. Maybe putting Nimmo in that 2-hole when he got back. And that's exactly what happened here. So, you know what? I like it because guess what? The Mets do have nothing to lose at this point. Yes, they're only sitting 3.5 games out of the wild card, but they got nothing to lose, especially at home. So I'm really hyped, Rob. Like I'm very hyped, and I'm very excited to see what this team goes out there tonight and does. Because I think that the personnel up top, especially Mendoza, they're doing all they can to put this team in a position to succeed. Because guess what? In years prior, let's just say, for example, last year, you see a combination that doesn't work. There really wasn't that much of an urgency, at least in my mind and what I remember, to switch things up, to put different people in different spots, maybe where they feel more comfortable. So I think that's really what the Mets are doing right here early and often in 2024 to try to mitigate this long slump that we saw back in 2023. And I got to commend them for it. It's a great job by the leadership and recognizing that and doing it. So this lineup for me is perfect. Now it's up to the players to go out there as each and every single game goes by. This is their job ultimately to go on the field and produce. They got to go out there and get it done. This guy's got a 5.95 ERA coming into tonight's game. Roderick Munoz, that is. Put some runs up on the damn board and get Luis Severino some breathing room, because Luis Severino has also been pitching his ass off this season. I can't wait for tonight's game, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It starts with tonight. And you win tonight, you guarantee going into the San Diego Padres series 3.5 games out of a wild card spot, the second wild card spot, not the third, the second, where the Padres are right now. And we have to understand that, because the fact that nobody wants to look at the wild card. I know Hector is not a big proponent of looking at the stand-ins or anything like that. But you know what? When you got 40 games left until the deadline, that's right, 40 games, right? You don't have time to worry about August and September, right? You can't worry. I love Hector, but Hector, you're going to worry about the wild card standings in August when they sell off half the team? No, you won't. You'll be pissed that they sold off the team, because you always want to win. You want to get to the playoffs, right? But it ain't going to happen. But guess what? They have an opportunity here. Again, we talked about this, right? We thought it was going to be the last homestand. Now it's back to this homestand. A 4-2, 5-1 homestand is going to probably put you within a game or two, maybe a game and a half of one of those wild card spots, maybe even in a wild card spot, depending on how it goes, depending on how the next couple of days go. But we're playing one of the teams that are in a wild card spot that you're not far away from. And I think it's important to realize that, and it's important to these players. And Met fans got to start realizing we have 40 games to turn heads, to turn the tables of what the front office is thinking right now. Because if I'm the front office right now, I'm thinking about, they're trying to do everything they can with this roster, making moves, changing lineups and all this stuff, what they can do at the moment to get this team going. But in the back of their minds, they are having a plan if things go awry to sell. And we all have to realize that this is not of, 1 or 2 month, 3 month, spread here where we can just play around and say, I'm not going to look at the standings, or I don't care about a wild card spot until, August 1st. Nobody's going to care, because unless the Mets are going to be buyers or staying pat, it's irrelevant. What matters now is the next 40 games until the deadline. That's what matters. Because if you show in the next 40 games, not even the next 40 games, show in this homestand that you can have a 4-2, 5-1 homestand, you score some runs, get a little confidence at home. Because I think what this team needs is the confidence at home and the fans to back them. Now, I understand why fans are not going to the Mets game, right? There's nothing to do outside of Citi Field. Some people have to take an hour and a half to get there, and it's a 2.5-hour game. You're in, you're out, and there's nothing to do pre or post. So I understand going to the game and just going for a game. And if they're not very good, I understand people not going who's on the fence, who don't want to travel 3 hours back and forth to watch a 2.5-hour game. I get that. But if you start winning at home, fans will show up and they will back this team. If the team has confidence in themselves, scoring runs at home, the fans are going to be behind them. And you know what? That combination is going to be hard to beat at home. And that's what this team needs. This team needs a confidence booster at home. And it takes them starting. Has nothing to do with the fans. There could be nobody in the ballpark. It's up to the fans to make it's up to the players to make the fans believe, to show up and support this team and back this team. Because if the team sounds like they don't have confidence at home, and you hear, a couple of times Dave said, we know the stats at home, they're not good, right? When you hear them say that, it's in their heads. So what do you expect the fans to think? You think they feel confident when they go to Citi Field or when they watch it on TV? Absolutely not. So it's this team, these players right now, got to show the confidence that they can score at home like they did yesterday, right? It's possible. They did it, right? They can do it. Do it again. This is not a good team in the Marlins. I understand the Mets aren't that much better, but we've talked about this many times. This team is better than what they're showing. I know the players said that, but it's obvious, because if these guys were playing to the back of their baseball cards, they would be a lot better. Just the lineup as a whole. If they would be playing at the back of their baseball cards, the majority of them, or most of them, this team would be looking a lot different. We should have 5 or 6 wins, probably a game under 500 or at 500, and we'll be talking about a wild card right now and not no nonsense trying to get the 500, which we're getting there, but we got to keep on going. Can we get past the 8-game under 500 mark? It seems like we get the 8 games and then we find our way back. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. We got to get forward, right? Get closer to 500, and it starts with this homestand because of the fact that you're facing a team that leads a wild card. It's so important because the way this National League is panning out, these tiebreakers might matter. It might not come up, right now and people talk about it. But you know what? If it comes out that the Mets end up being tied for a wild card spot and you lose it because of a stupid game in June 13th or 15th or wherever it is against the Padres or whoever else, you're going to go back to that game when nobody really cared and be like, damn. So now is the time. Where is that confidence offensively at home? The players got to start, and the fans will come. I'm telling you, the fans will back this team. The fans want to back this team. As much as they hate them, they would back them as soon as they show some type of life at Citi Field, Chris. So with Diaz coming back, that starts the energy in the ballpark, right? Everybody knows he's coming back. Everybody wants to get that lead, that save situation so the lights can flicker and, the trumpets can come on and everybody goes nuts. That brings the energy back to this ballpark, this life back into the team. If Diaz is somewhat close to 2022 and he's pitched pretty decent in his rehab starts, if it was this impingement, Chris, that was ailing him, and it wasn't, he was out the whole year, he never dealt with the pitch clock, but it was the impingement. And if he's healthy now, then we should see somewhat of a similar Diaz of 2022 with more strikeouts, more flair, more confidence. I think they just need that burst of energy, and it's got to come from somewhere. And I'm hoping yesterday's performance offensively starts that trend at Citi Field, because if they start scoring runs, the fans are going to start believing, because that's the main thing I think this fan base doesn't believe, is because of the fact that they don't score runs at home. They go on the road, they look like a different team. They come home, they look like a boring, lifeless team. That needs to change, Chris.
Yeah. One question I had for you is that I saw somewhere on the Mets X world that the Mets are doing those lights off, flickering of lights, closer entrance for both teams. I don't know if you know that. I don't know if you've seen that. I don't know if it's true.
The last Met game I went to, we ended up being 1-5, so there wasn't a lot of excitement or Diaz that I seen. So I don't know. You might have to ask Hector or whoever's been in the game in the chat. I don't know. I know that it was supposed to be the home run thing. They flickered the lights and all that stuff. If that's true, I mean, maybe that's like during a commercial they like to do that as well. I don't know. I haven't been to Citi Field since the beginning of April, so I don't know. That's something for somebody else who's been there. But if that's true,
someone that's in the chat that has been to a game recently, a night game recently, that has seen this, I'm very curious, because if they did that for the Marlins in game 1 of the series, that doesn't make too much sense to me. But what I will say about Diaz, though, just transferring back to that discussion about Edwin Diaz, is that honestly, I don't really think it's impingement, right, in his arm versus whatever's going down below, whether it's his knee, etc. I think that all the body parts, especially if you're an athlete, especially if you're a pitcher, are connected. So if he's laboring somewhere down there in his lower half with his knee, then by default, the upper torso and the upper part of his body is going to have to take more damage regardless. That's just how baseball, whether it's a swing or whether it's a throw, right, from a pitcher or an infielder, etc., whatever, just the dynamics of an actual throw. If your lower half is compensating, or if you're compensating for your lower half, your upper half is automatically going to be that part to sort of play a bigger role than it's supposed to. So we don't even know if it's like an isolated kind of injury, because the Mets won't obviously announce this. They won't sort of like tell the fans this is why it was. But it could just be the fact that maybe his knee was still bothering him and he had to use a little bit more upper half. And that's when he was over rotating. And that's when his shoulder got involved. Like, we don't know. So that's why I want to kind of like stop that like discussion slow in its tracks, because just because they labeled it an impingement doesn't mean that it wasn't because of something happening in his lower half. And that's just me scientifically speaking, because I've been through multiple physical therapy sessions myself. And I've learned that anything that's plaguing me in my upper half is probably due to even down into my weak ankles, like that I've sprained probably 10 times, 12 times in my life. And that's the one fun fact that I learned. So just want to make sure that's translated to you all as well. Just because Edwin Diaz has an arm injury, a shoulder injury, whatever, doesn't mean it's not because it's coming from his lower half. But anyways, I agree with you. The overall sentiment is keep hitting and this team will be fine. I promise you, outside of the Adrian Hauser start early on in the season, maybe outside of a Jose Quintana, who's been absolutely putrid as of recently, I don't worry about the Mets pitching. I don't. I worry about the offense and if it's going to show up. Because guess what? The pitchers, for the most part, I'm generalizing this season so far, and it's the same thing that we saw yesterday.
Yeah.
They hold their own. Yes, they give up runs. Yes, Peterson's going to give up 4 earned runs, right? Your starters are going to do that. But your offense has to match that at bare minimum. You know what I mean? And in these close games that you said, right? You look back at like a random game in May where they dropped. And I'm not going to go back into the weeds of things because I don't know their schedule and what we saw in May, just like off the top of my head here without looking at it. But like, that is something where you look back on and it's like, wow, they really dug themselves a hole here. So you don't want to keep digging that hole further here on June 13th by losing to another lowly Marlins team, which they did in Miami the previous month. Beat the teams you're supposed to beat. It's why the Phillies are considered record-wise one of the best teams in baseball, because they beat up on the bad teams and they've had one of the easier schedules this season so far.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the exact thing, right? You know, the reason why the Mets are in so many close games this year is because the pitching has kept them in the game. Even if they gave up a lead or they didn't give up a lead or they were tied, it was always close games. And they found a way to lose it because the opportunities that they had offensively, they didn't come through on. And it's been too many times like that. If the lineup does their job, I'm confident that the pitching, yes, they're going to give up runs, but I feel like they're going to keep them in the ball game, and they find ways to keep them close enough where either it's, like yesterday, right? They were slowly coming back, but guess what? Nunez came in and put the hammer down. Boom. And the Mets scored a couple of more runs. I think they just need to relax. I feel like Pete Alonso can't show what he's shown the other day. That for me, I was so pissed off at that because of the fact that don't show your emotion like that. Like, if you want to bang your glove, bang your bat, bang your helmet, I get that. The best players in the world have done that, right? But when you look lost in the dugout, that shows that you have no answer for yourself. And you know what? It's not just fans seeing that. It's the other team that sees it as well. Lindor saw it. Your own teammates saw it. You're supposed to be one of the big boys on your team. I'm not calling him a leader, but one of your big boppers on the team. You can't just look like you're completely lost and make everybody in the world see it. And I think that kind of like trickles through other players. Like, wow, look at this. If Pete can go through that, I can go through it. I just felt like that vibe. And I think that's a big reason why the offense did absolutely garbage in that first game against the Marlins, because I felt like the vibe around that in that clubhouse or in that dugout, it kind of like trickled down from Pete Alonso. He looked lost and everybody else looked like they had problems at the plate, and it was frustrating. And I don't know what happened the next day. Maybe they just forgot about it, but they need to just calm down. I feel like they're squeezing the bat too tight. I feel like, in pressurized situations, they're, again, squeezing the bat too tight. They're not going up there they're thinking too much. I think that's probably what I'm trying to say. And I think they just need to relax, specifically at home. And I think they could do that.
I have a response, and I agree with you 100%. I have a response here to Junior that's saying Bader hit a home run. Junior didn't say he hit a home run, but I'm just saying by my personal assumption, this is where the comment's coming from. Bader had a successful night at the plate yesterday at the 2-hole. Why is he in the 9-hole now? I said this on the post game is that the Mets can make so many lineup changes, but the fact of the matter remains is that they are not going to move those top 4 out of those top 4.
No.
That is and, like, for better or for worse, I don't know, but, like, maybe that's stubbornness, maybe it's smart, I don't know. This lineup, whatever iteration of it we're gonna see this season is probably gonna have these top 4 in it.
Yeah.
Pre-deadline, right? Before anybody gets sold off, if they get sold off. Like, I've seen it countless of times where like, oh, maybe Francisco Lindor should bat 5th for a change. No, they're not going to do it because they're going to keep these top 4 the same. Same thing with Brandon Nimmo. A lot of people are saying, well, why not bat Brandon Nimmo 5th or 6th? No, because this is the Mets. These top 4 are going to be here until they're not.
Yeah.
And that's just the bottom line. And I think that the 9th spot, as much, I guess, not even hate, but just as much like, I guess, crap that it gets, that's like the closest you can get a hot hitter to the back to the top of the lineup like Harrison Bader. And you
I love
obviously
that
don't do
spot.
that with Mark Vientos, right? You can't do that with Mark Vientos because he's more of like a power hitter, a
Yeah.
doubles hitter. But Harrison Bader's a guy that can definitely turn the lineup over, and that therefore it makes sense to me. But honestly, the one thing that I guess still bothers me about these lineup constructions and these lineup changes, even though I like that they change it, is that there's such a stubbornness to not change the top 4 regardless of whatever iteration that we see. But that's just like nitpicking at that point. Like there's no like, you know what I mean? You can't get overly mad at it.
Yeah. And Chris, look, if people would have Bader and Vientos say 2-3, and it would have been Lindor and Martinez or Alonso 4th or whatever you want to put it, and you put like Bader and Vientos in the 3-4 spot, the 2-3 spot, and move, say, Martinez out and Nimmo out of the 2-3 role or something like that, and they go offers. Everybody like, what the hell are you doing? Because these guys they're not supposed to be at the top of the order. Can we be honest about that? Like, Harrison Bader, look, he's been our most clutch hitter, but that doesn't mean you're going to bat him 2nd or 3rd and think he's going to perform the entire year. It doesn't work like that, right? These guys that you see at the top of the lineup are there for a reason because their numbers say that's where they should be. Right? I'm sorry. I mean, do you want to, put Torrens in the 2nd or Marte in 3rd? It sounds nice because they're hitting well, but when you put them in those spots, that whole mentality changes. The same thing what I talked about with Nimmo being in the 3rd spot. I think he completely changed his game at the plate because I think he felt more pressure driving in runs than what he knows what to do best. And I think that goes for every hitter or every player. I think there's a lot of guys like Brandon Nimmo should be the perfect leadoff hitter. He got a ton of speed. He works the count, but he doesn't do the other things well on the base paths to tell me that he's a leadoff hitter. I like him in the 2-hole, right? Lindor is successful right now in the leadoff spot because he's done it before, right? And he steals bases, which is why I love Nimmo in the 2 spot because he can take a ton of pitches and give Lindor chances to steal, by the way. I think that's a good combination we're probably going to see today if Lindor gets on base today. But that's what I think it is. I think it's a mentality game, right? Unless guys are off, like if it's off days for like yesterday with Nimmo, there wasn't a lot of options at the 2-hole. Yeah, you could have put Marte there, but you know what? Marte's driving in runs right now. So you're not going to put him in the 2-hole because that 2-hole spot isn't a run-producing spot. That's not really going to help him. You want Marte behind the Martinez and the Alonsos and the Lindors and whoever else is in that 2 spot because there's probably going to be guys on base for Marte who's been hitting the cover off the ball. And look, you also got Vientos there. So not only do you help the middle to the back end of your lineup, but it still also tells you that your best hitters, there should be no reason why they're hitting out of the top 4. You can change them any way you want. The fact of the matter is, are you batting Aaron Judge 7th because you want to change up the line? No, you're not doing that, right? The same thing with Pete Alonso. Look, I've killed Pete Alonso as many times as anybody probably on anywhere you can find, right? And it's not that I don't want him to succeed. Of course, I want him to eat. I want to eat my words about Pete Alonso, but I'm not moving him out of the 4th spot or the 3rd spot or even the 2. If he's 2, 3, or 4, I'm not going to go crazy over. But I'm not going to put up a lineup and have Pete Alonso batting 5th or 6th. It just does not make sense, right? Alonso, who's the biggest RBI guy, I don't see him in the 2-hole. It made no sense. But who knows with this analytic lineups nowadays? It made no sense. I know you give him an extra at bat. Yeah.
That's all dependent on people setting him up in that position. Like when we talk about lineups and we talk about classic lineups or old school lineups where your power hitter hits 4th, your best average hitter hits 3rd, that's because generally you would expect the 1st and 2nd guys to get on for those guys, and your
Correct.
3rd guy goes and delivers a double for an RBI, and then your power hitter hits a home run, and theoretically in the 1st inning, you'd be up 4-0 already with no outs. Like that is a perfect world scenario. It just simply doesn't work out that way in the game of baseball, especially at the major league level.
I
What I
don't
mean?
know. Yeah, I understand that, but I think that's kind of the younger you because you're younger talking only because and it's not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying the fact that you can't go 110 years of baseball and it's been your best hitter is your 3 hitter, your best RBI guy is your 4th hitter. It's usually always been like that, and baseball hasn't changed that much. Like stolen bases before the new rule change have been down, but like I feel like if your guys at the top,
I will argue that it has changed though, because in your old school baseball days, and I'm not arguing though, I don't get it misconstrued. I'm not arguing for Pete to bat 5th or 6th. I'm not arguing that. But
no,
I
I
will
didn't
say
think that.
to counter that, you've never seen an Aaron Judge or Kyle Schwarber hit leadoff. That you've never seen that in history of baseball in that 110 plus years that you're
Well,
talking about. That's where baseball is different. Like you have power hitters now hitting 1st and 2nd in the lineup, whereas before your leadoff hitters, it would be a miracle if they put a ball over the fence for you.
oh yeah,
So I
absolutely.
will disagree with you there.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can agree to disagree on that, but again, just because the Phillies are good right now doesn't mean Kyle Schwarber is doing well in the leadoff spot. Like he's really not.
Oh
Like
no, absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Like I mean, Aaron Judge. We talk about Aaron Judge. He's on a different level on like any other player. Like you can bat him leadoff, 2nd, 3rd. The difference with Aaron Judge batting anywhere in the lineup is that he hits for average and power, and he has speed. He can steal bases as well. Pete Alonso's a power hitter. That's all he is. He's not an average guy, at least not anymore. Apparently, he's not an average guy. He's not a guy who can, steal any bases. So I feel like Aaron Judge could be more productive at the 2-hole as much as he can be productive at the 4-hole because I think he brings more dynamic offensively and with his legs than what Pete Alonso could do. That's why I think Pete Alonso is more suited for the 3 or 4 spot, just because he doesn't do anything else really. Look, if he was batting 290, I don't care where he bats as long as he's not batting leadoff. I'm good. But I just feel like Pete Alonso, he is more prone to hit mistakes and hit the ball over the wall, which benefits this team. Like if he's on the Yankees, he can bat 7th and probably be extremely good, right? But on this team, when we need him to be the biggest run producer, I think it makes more sense to put him 3 or 4. That's the only reason why. Like any other lineup, that's the point I'm trying to make. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yes, I agree. And I will never agree to move Pete Alonso outside of like that 2 through 4 range. And even 2 is a stretch because we've seen Pete Alonso, especially last season when he got moved into that 2-hole, have some success. And I don't even really know why that is. Maybe it's better pitches, maybe it's not. It doesn't really matter. But the fact of the matter is, like in 2022, what do he have? 130 plus RBIs. Like we know this guy can bring in runs when he is fully locked and loaded. So like it makes no sense to take him out of that role because honestly, regardless of what he does, I probably entrust him more than half the other roster, half this roster
Yeah,
right behind him to bring in those runs.
I agree.
That's the bottom line. So yeah, no, I agree with you, but nonetheless, I agree with you. Like I said, the bottom line for me is that you can shake up this lineup 1,000 different times. The bottom line is that wherever they get put, wherever Mendoza slots them in at, they need to hit, and they need to hit in front of the home crowd. They did so yesterday. Let's see it today. Because guess what? We got a game today, and we need to win it. Bottom line. This is like,
Absolutely.
I hate to say this because this is against the lowly Marlins. This is June 13th. You know what I mean? It's like 3.5 games out of the wild card. If we drop one, will we go to 4.5 games? Will we not? This is a must-win game for the Mets, man.
It is.
This is a must-win game because they put themselves, like we said at the top of this podcast, in a hole at the beginning of the season, especially last month with the way they performed. They put themselves in a hole. So now us as Mets fans, especially ones that come up here on camera to talk about them, we have to say that this needs to be a series win. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Get the job done. This is a much needed win. Maybe not in terms of the WL column, but for the confidence, for the
Yep.
fans to be like, whoa, yo, this team just won a series against the Marlins. Awesome. We're maybe 2.5 out by the end of tonight. Let's go watch them, right, with the weekend series coming up against the San Diego Padres. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
can directly feed into it. And it sounds corny. I know it sounds corny. We want to boycott this team. People saying don't show up to the stadium, don't support this team. What good is a wild card spot going to do? Like I get all of that. That's understandable. But you have to realize that for us, especially talking about this team, we have to talk about them one game at a time. Like I
Yep.
can sit here continuously on a stream and talk about why this should be a full-blown tanking season, why we should just blow it up and we should just focus on 2025. What good is that going to do? And me as a fan, because I speak about this team like how I fan. Like, I'm not going to come out here and say, let's blow it up for 2025, because guess what? I'm going to sit here and watch this game at 7:10 p.m. And if I'm going to dedicate my night to that, am I going to really root for an L? No, I'm going to root for the W. So we're just speaking out here, especially because we do these streams in a multitude of ways. Like we do this stream 4 or 5 times per week. And I just want to preface that we don't lose sight of what the actual end goal is, right? And I don't want to speak for you, Rob, here as well, but we do these streams so often that in each and every stream, we have to talk about tonight, and tonight is a
Yep.
must-win game. And it
Absolutely.
doesn't lose sight of the fact that we understand that this team probably, whether you agree with Rob's poll or you don't, this team's a playoff team. That's like beside the point. We're sitting here and telling you all and trying to convey to you all why the Mets should win this game, other than the fact that it's the Marlins. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And look, yes, it is the Marlins, but the fact is, I don't care if they were playing, Murderers Row, Yankees. I don't care if they were playing the best team ever in baseball. You got to find a way to win today. I don't care how it is. I don't care if it's a 2-1 ball game. I don't care if it's a 10-9 ball game. You blow out a team. I don't care. Win the ball game. It doesn't matter how you do it. And I think that's the issue with a lot of people too. Like a lot of people, like the Mets could win 10-9 and everybody will complain, even though they got the win because how they won, because it was not the way it should have been. But it's baseball. You take the W any way you can. And I just looked at this. I just looked at the schedule today. The Padres are not playing today. They're traveling to New York. So if the Mets win today, they are officially 3 games out of a wild card spot. So that means coming in for 3 is the Padres 3 games back. And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. Because if you beat the Padres, say if you sweep the Padres, I know that's crazy thinking right now, but if you sweep the Padres, you can be talking about on Monday the Mets being in a wild card spot, 2 or 3 games under 500. Like it sounds crazy, but it's math. That's all it is. Like it's not hard to figure out. Everybody can say, "Oh, this team's not good enough." I'm sorry. Even if two teams are under 500 and make the wild card, the second and third wild card, you wouldn't care if you're one of those teams? Of course you would. You're gonna tell me you're gonna go to sleep and not watch the wild card, the playoff series because your team is under 500, watching watching a wild card team because they're under 500. You're not gonna care. I don't care. Right? The Diamondbacks didn't care. The Phillies didn't care. And you know what? Whoever team make the second and third wild card, if they're a 500 team, who cares? You're in the playoffs. All you got to do is have a couple of hot series in a row, and we'll be talking about a World Series contention, a World Series team that can actually make it.
I won't go that far. I won't go that far, Rob.
No,
but
I'm just saying that it's possible.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I won't go that far, but I will say in response to what Joel's saying in the chat is that look at those teams in between that third wild card spot and the Mets. How many of those teams can you confidently say, right, that they are hands down better than the Mets?
Not many.
Let's say the Mets clean up some of their act, not even the whole act, because they have a lot of acting going on this season so far, and it's not good acting. We understand that because we've been talking about it. But how many teams in between the Mets and that wild card spot can you confidently say are better than the Mets?
Yeah.
And so I agree with you in that part, but I will say I got to slow down on the whole let's catch a run, let's get to the World Series.
I was thinking about any team. I was generalizing. Joel, it doesn't matter how many teams are in between because you're facing a team that's in a spot. It doesn't matter. Because honestly, have you been paying attention to the teams above the Mets? They would win one, lose two. Win two, lose two. So nobody has been winning 3 in a row, 4 in a row, but in front of the Mets. They just haven't. Right? I think the longest winning streak has been 4, and that was like 2 weeks ago from any of the teams in front of the Mets. So it's not impossible. Like it can be a quick jump, right? And all these teams that are in front of it are like a half a game and a half. So in 2 days, you can jump over 4 or 5 teams if all those teams lose. I know it's crazy to think, but these teams haven't been going on winning streaks, including the Mets. So, it takes one team to go on a 4 or 5 game winning streak to jump a lot of teams.
Can I make a little bit of a caveat here? Because a lot of people, I think, in this stream, and you guys have been listening to us, so you guys probably should know, but I still want to preface this by saying that we understand that this is a 29-37 team. We are not naive to that fact. We are not ignoring that fact. They've been playing bad baseball. They've been playing honestly laughable baseball with the fact that we had somewhat of expectations, especially after that JD Martinez signing. We know that. We know that they are quote unquote bad. Let's be honest. Like they've been playing bad baseball. And I'm not going to be afraid to call out that fact. But with multiple circumstances happening, multiple phenomenons happening, whether it's with the Mets or outside of their control in the rest of the NL, they are in the spot that they're in, which is in a wild card race. So us here on June 13th, because we're probably going to make let's give or take 40 to 50 more streams about this team until the deadline, right? Give or take. Let's just give or take 40 or 50 more streams until the deadline. Like, why would we exhaust deadline talk and off-season talk on June 13th when the Mets right here are in a wild card race? We're not telling you to believe because they're playing good baseball. We're telling you to just sort of just keep an eye out and be mindful of the fact that they're still somehow in it. It's up to them whether they want to start playing good baseball or not, which coincidentally we can't control if you can't tell. So
and
I just wanted to say that. That's why I wanted.
I'm glad you said that because you know what? For everybody in the chat, right? We are all the same way. We're the same type of. We have different ways of being a fan, but we're all kind of the same way, right? If the Mets pull off 4 or 5 in a row, and you know what, you're gonna hear SNY or whatever sports talk radio you listen to, or wherever sports media you're looking at, and they show the standings, and you see the Mets in a wild card spot, you're not going to care about the record. I'm sorry, guys. You're just not. If the Mets have a good June and they have a 5 or 6 game over 500 June and they're right in the mix, you're not going to care about the record. I'm sorry to say, because you know what? The Giants are the third wild card team. They're They're what, 2 games under 500 if I'm not mistaken. I think I checked that, right? They're 2 games under 500, and is it true? Oh, excuse me, 1 game under 500, right? They were 2 games yesterday, right there. 1 game under 500. If that remains, and this has look, it's almost 70 games already. So how much of a jump of a difference they're going to make? There's a pretty good chance that a 2 or 3 games over 500 is probably going to be the third wildcard team, probably, and maybe not even much more than that, if any, much more than that, could be the second wildcard team. The reason we're not talking about this Mets team as being good, but the rest of the National League is just as inconsistent and mediocre as the Mets. And it takes a week. That's why I keep on saying, that's why these games are so important, especially at home, because you can go 4-2 and 5-1 in a homestand and be probably in a playoff spot. And that can change a week later if they have a bad stretch. But that's the reason why. It's not about confidence of this team, or we're telling you this team is good, this team is amazing, but we're all going to get excited if this team is in a playoff spot on Monday because of their 4-2, 5-1 homestand. If they do that, now it's a big if, but if they do that, nobody's going to talk about the record that they're a few games, 3, 4, 5 games under 500. They're going to look where we are. How did that happen? And it takes a week, because if you look back on the 2022 field about a World Series run, I'm talking about how they made the playoffs. They had a week or 2 stretch late in the season. Unfortunately for the Mets, this is late in their season because of the deadline. They had a week or 2 stretch that changed everything, where the Arizona Diamondbacks jumped over 5 teams in the last 2 weeks of the season to make a wild card spot. The Phillies did the same thing. Because it is possible, because nobody has been going on winning streaks in the National League that's above the Mets right now. And that's great for the Mets, because that means they're still in it mathematically based on the mediocre National League. That's all I have to say. But Chris, final words that I'm going to make sure you have, so I stop rambling. Diaz is back. Let's see how that works out for us. Hopefully we get to see him tonight in a safe situation. Offense, gotta score. You can't score 10 runs yesterday and score 1 today. No confidence if that happens in this team. So, Chris, final thoughts of this team tonight and going forward.
Win the game.
Well, that was long, but that was right. Win the ball game. With that said, guys, the Mets play in about an hour. Let's see if they can take the rubber game. We got Severino, the best pitcher on this rotation, probably the whole season. So, and, beat up on Munoz. Who the hell is he? He has almost a 6 ERA, guys. Let's win game 67 and talk about the Padres coming up. That's what we got to do. We still got a chance to have a really good homestand. That's what they got to do. With that said, another Amazin Mets pregame in the books. Chris, you have a good day. Everybody in the chat, have a great day. Let's go Mets, guys. Let's get that W. Let's get that series win. Have a great night.
Let's go Mets.